Black CEO forced out of his VIP seat for white passenger minutes later. The entire crew was replaced. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. It started with a voice that cut through the cabin like a metal hinge snapping under pressure. Sir, you'll need to move. That seat isn't meant for someone like you. Row 1, a first-class window, champagne still sweating on the tray table. A full cabin of passengers lifted their heads at once, the way a theater audience reacts when someone interrupts the show. The overhead lights hummed. A child stopped mid-laugh. Even the engine's steady whirl felt quieter, as if the plane itself were listening. The flight attendant stood rigid, her smile thin and lacquered like it had been sprayed on but never warmed the room. Her name tag read Karensen in neat block letters. Her tone carried the crisp authority of someone who enjoyed enforcing rules more than understanding them. She pointed at the black man seated calmly in 1A. That seat belongs to a priority passenger, she announced loudly, making sure every row heard it. You'll need to return to your reassigned section. Immediately. Murmurs swelled like a low tide. Someone lifted a phone. Someone else whispered, "He probably upgraded wrong." Another, "They always try that." The man didn't move, didn't bristle, didn't blink. His name was Jordan Hayes, but no one on that aircraft knew it yet. To them, he was just a sharply dressed black traveler who had dared to sit where they didn't think he belonged. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable, quiet, composed, the kind of stillness that unnerves anyone expecting anger. "I'm in the seat assigned to me," he said quietly. Her smile hardened. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Before Jordan could speak again, a white man from the aisle stepped forward, expensive watch, tailored vest, the scent of entitlement preceding him. "That's my seat," he said, not even looking at Jordan. "They told me it was being held." The attendant nodded at him with honeyed professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Aldridge, we're handling it." Then, turning back to Jordan, her voice dropped the sweetness like a mask falling. "Sir, stand up. Now." Row 1B snorted under his breath. Should have known. Row 2A sighed. Every flight. A woman across the aisle whispered, "He should just go back." Jordan didn't react. His breathing stayed level, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady. That unshaken calm, the kind that belonged to someone used to storms, only seemed to irritate the attendant more. She leaned closer, her whisper sharp enough to slice. "You're holding up our departure. Don't embarrass yourself. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Jordan. The cabin grew colder, not literally, just the way judgment freezes a room from the inside out. Jordan rose slowly, gathering his coat with meticulous grace, the kind that makes cruelty feel suddenly small. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead his case. He simply stepped out of 1A, as if stepping out of someone else's mistake. But the silence his movement created was deafening. The white passenger, Aldridge, smirked at him, sliding into the seat with the entitlement of a man sliding into destiny. "Thanks," he said casually, not recognizing the irony dripping from the word. Jordan didn't respond. The attendant gestured toward the back. "You'll sit in 14C. Middle. Middle. The punishment seat for the unimportant." Phones tilted. Recording lights glowed like predatory eyes. The humiliation was public. That was the point. Jordan walked down the aisle, each step slow, deliberate, like someone counting the beats of a fuse burning towards something no one else could see. 3 rows before reaching 14C, a businessman muttered, "Should've stayed in economy to begin with." A young woman shook her head, pitying him without realizing pity was the last thing he needed. Jordan finally reached his new seat, sat down, buckled in, rested his hands calmly on his knee, and then, only then, did the cabin shift again. Not because he spoke, but because his phone lit up with a single name. Aerolux Operations HQ. Priority call. The same airline these people believed he wasn't good enough to sit in front of. Jordan tapped the screen with a stillness that felt like a blade being unsheathed. "Go ahead," he said. His voice stayed low, controlled, dangerous in its quiet. Whatever he said next would change the fate of everyone on that aircraft. The engines growled beneath the floor, steady, confident, unaware of the storm forming inside the cabin. Passengers were settling into the small rituals of flight, buckling belts, adjusting vents, pretending not to stare at the man who had just been stripped of his dignity in front of 100 strangers. Jordan held the phone to his ear, eyes forward, back straight, as if anchored to something stronger than humiliation. "Yes," he murmured, voice steady. "Initiate echo." Quietly. He didn't raise his tone, didn't look around, didn't explain. But a woman across the aisle, the one with the navy blazer and the cautious eyes, heard just enough to shiver. Echo. The syllable landed in the air with a weight that didn't match its size. Jordan ended the call. The screen dimmed. The cabin didn't. Instead, something subtle shifted the way heat leaves a room when a door opens to winter. Conversations softened. A few passengers who had recorded the earlier scene put their phones down, suddenly unsure if they had captured an injustice or the beginning of something else entirely. Row 15. An older man with silver hair and a smartwatch glowing on his wrist frowned at his notifications. "Strange. My airline board thread is buzzing, and we haven't even taken off yet." Row 12. A young content creator whispered, "Is something happening?" Her friend shrugged, then flinched when a flight attendant hurried past without the practiced calm they normally wear like armor. The intercom clicked. Everyone froze. A voice measured, polite, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a slight delay before takeoff. Thank you for your patience." It wasn't the captain. It was operations. And operations never made announcements. Jordan didn't look up. He simply exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, while the flight attendant who had humiliated him earlier stiffened near the galley door. Her perfect smile had wilted into something thin, strained, almost trembling. She tapped the intercom panel, tried again. Captain? Do you want to?" Static. Silence. From the cockpit's cracked door, a silhouette shifted impatiently. The pilot leaned out, his face tight. He wasn't annoyed, he was confused, maybe even nervous. "Carenson," he said under his breath, "why is ground control asking us to re-verify the crew manifest?" She blinked. "Re-verify? We already checked it. They're asking again." Passengers traded looks like cards at a poker table no one wanted to lose. Jordan remained still, but the stillness wasn't passive. It radiated, it spread, it made the metal walls feel too small for whatever had just been set into motion. Alderidge, the man now sitting smugly in Jordan's original seat, pressed his call button impatiently. "What's going on? I have a meeting. This flight needs to move." No one rushed to respond. A younger attendant approached Jordan, nervous in the way people get when they sense a hierarchy they didn't know existed. "Sir, would you like a complimentary drink while we wait?" She almost whispered it, as if afraid the senior attendant would snap at her. Jordan looked at her gentle smile, eyes filled with something like apology, and he shook his head. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'm fine." It was the softness that scared her, because softness from someone who should be angry means they aren't finished. Somewhere near row 3, a middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "Hes too calm." That's never a good sign. The intercom cracked again. "Flight crew, please disarm doors and stand by." A collective murmur rippled down the aisle. That wasn't protocol. Not here, not now. One of the attendants bit her lip. Disarm? But we're not. Then she saw something. A line of yellow-vested ground staff assembling just outside the plane. 3 supervisors, someone with a clipboard, security, the kind of group that never appears unless something has gone very, very wrong. The senior attendant, the one who told Jordan to move, turned pale. She adjusted her uniform, tugged her collar, wiped her palms on her skirt. Her voice shook when she whispered, What is this?" Jordan didn't answer her. He didn't need to. A message buzzed on his screen. "Echo protocol active. Crew review in progress. Briefing awaits your confirmation." The aircraft door opened, cold air swept in, and for the first time since he boarded, Jordan Hayes finally lifted his gaze, slow, calm, inevitable. The room didn't know it yet, but the temperature had dropped low enough that something was going to crack. The cabin door swung open with a metallic sigh, letting in a slice of sharp airport air. It cut through the stale tension like a blade, crisp enough to make several passengers straighten in their seats. Outside the door, silhouettes shifted supervisors, security personnel. An operations lead in a dark jacket with an ID tag that swung like a pendulum of authority. Inside, no one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. The plane felt suspended, hovering in a moment heavier than gravity. Jordan Hayes sat perfectly still in 14C. No outrage. No trembling hands. No resentment leaking from his posture. Just stillness with structure. The senior flight attendant, Karenson, swallowed hard. Her glossy lipstick suddenly looked too bright under the harsh LED cabin lights. "What is going on?" she whispered to herself. But everyone heard it. Every row felt the tremor of fear behind her words. A supervisor stepped inside the aircraft. Bald, stern, clipboard tucked under one arm. His badge identified him as Operations Director Lionel Stone, the kind of name employees recognized before his face ever appeared. He didn't smile. A uniformed ground agent followed behind him, holding a sealed envelope. Only a few people on board understood what that envelope meant. Crew evaluations, immediate actions, terminations. Karenson stiffened, smoothing her uniform. She practiced a smile that wouldn't stay steady. "Director Stone," she began, voice wobbling. Is there an issue?" Stone's eyes swept the cabin. Cold, clinical, measuring the temperature of a room that was already melting under his presence. "There is," he said simply. Someone near row 6 gasped. A phone lifted, then hesitated mid-air, not sure if this was a moment they were allowed to capture. The director produced a tablet, tapped the screen. A series of recorded complaints and timestamps lit up in a timeline. Passenger discrimination. Seat reassignment violation. Escalation without cause. Failure of protocol. Karenson's breath hitched. "Wait, sir, if this is about the seat mix-up, I can explain." Stone didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned toward row 14. Toward Jordan. The shift in attention was physical. People leaned forward as if gravity had changed direction. Even the engines outside seemed to quiet, letting the moment sharpen. "Mr. Hayes," Stone said, voice steady enough to steady the air around him, "we received your call." Row 1, A. Aldridge, the man who claimed the seat, froze mid-adjustment of his cufflinks. A few passengers exchanged glances filled with dawning realization. "Mr. Hayes?" Karenson blinked rapidly. "Sir, you know him?" Stone gave a curt nod. "I report to him." The temperature cratered. Someone's water bottle slipped from their hands and thudded against the carpet. Phones slowly lowered, not out of politeness, but out of the instinctive fear that comes when people realize they mocked the wrong person. Aldridge swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing like a buoy in a storm. "He has with corporate?" Stone corrected him without shifting tone. "Has the reason corporate exists." Now the whispers erupted. "Wait, what? Has the CEO? No, he can't be. Oh, dear God." Jordan didn't move. He didn't need to. His stillness was becoming a language the whole room understood. Stone stepped aside, allowing 2 more supervisors to enter. "Effective immediately," he announced to the cabin. "The flight crew assigned to this aircraft is being relieved of duty pending internal review." Karenson staggered. "Relieved, sir. You can't. It's already done." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again like she was trying to breathe in a room without oxygen. But the passenger, he refused to move. Stone's gaze sliced through her excuse. "Passengers assigned a seat do not refuse to move. They sit in the seat they paid for. What they do not do." He turned the tablet toward her, displaying footage. "Is endure discrimination on a flight owned by their own investment group." The cabin recoiled as if struck. Aldridge's voice cracked. "Investment group? What? What investment group?" Jordan finally lifted his head, not with anger, but with the quiet inevitability of a truth surfacing. "Aerolux Holdings," he said softly. The name sent a ripple through the aircraft. Stone nodded. "Mr. Hayes is the controlling shareholder and chief executive of Aerolux." Row 1 luxury class went silent. Row 14, where Jordan sat, felt like the center of a shifting universe. Carrington stared, lips quivering. I didn't know. Jordan met her eyes. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just truthfully. You didn't care to. The line wasn't loud, but it echoed through the fuselage with the weight of a verdict. A new crew assembled at the door, uniforms crisp, expressions neutral. A replacement captain approached the cockpit while the outgoing captain stepped out, head lowered in shame. Passengers watched the exchange as if witnessing a historical event, corporate justice delivered at cruising altitude. Stone addressed the plane. We apologize for the delay. A new crew will ensure this flight continues with professionalism and respect. He turned to Jordan. Mr. Hayes, your original seat will be restored once the cabin is resecured. Jordan stood, but only to clarify one thing. That won't be necessary. Stone blinked. Sir? Jordan glanced toward the front, toward the seat had been thrown out of, then toward the shaken crew. I'd rather stay here. People tend to learn better when they see the cost of their assumptions. Passengers held their breath. Carrington nearly collapsed under her own regret. And somewhere, deep inside the plane's steel ribs, the balance of power shifted without force, without volume, with nothing but a man reclaiming the space that should never have been taken from him. The new crew boarded with the precision of a changing guard. Quiet footsteps, crisp uniforms, eyes trained straight ahead. They carried no judgment, no smirks, no lingering arrogance, only discipline, only readiness. The contrast was jarring. Passengers, those who had whispered earlier, those who had filmed, those who had laughed, sat straighter, unsure whether to apologize, hide, or pretend they hadn't been part of the spectacle minutes ago. Jordan remained seated in 14C, hands relaxed, posture controlled, gaze neutral. He wasn't grandstanding, he wasn't gloating, he was simply present, fully, quietly, unavoidably. Director Stone stepped aside as the outgoing crew gathered near the galley. Carrington stood at the front of them, her polished composure cracked beyond repair. Her hands trembled as she clutched her service manual, knuckles white. Sir Mr. Hayes, if I may, she began. Jordan lifted one hand slightly, not to silence her, just to acknowledge her request. She nodded, swallowing hard. I'm truly sorry. I didn't realize. Jordan's voice cut softly through the air. That's the problem, Miss Carrington. You shouldn't have to realize who someone is to treat them with basic dignity. A hush rolled through the cabin. Not the fearful silence from earlier, not the tense anticipation, but something else, an uncomfortable recognition. She lowered her gaze. I understand, she whispered. Stone stepped forward, professionalism restored. You'll have the opportunity to speak with HR after landing. Everyone understood what that meant. After landing was corporate language, for the consequences have already begun. The door closed. The locks clicked. Fresh pressure sealed inside the cabin. The aircraft felt different now, cleaner, clearer, as if someone had opened a window in a room long suffocating from arrogance. The replacement captain made his way down the aisle. Older, calmer, presence built on 30,000 hours in the air. He stopped beside Jordan. Mr. Hayes, he said quietly, we've been fully briefed. Your comfort and safety are our priority. If there is anything you need during this flight, you have my word. Jordan nodded once. Thank you, Captain. Just take us home. A simple request, a simple truth. But the captain heard the deeper note beneath it, the exhaustion of a man who carried power without needing to display it, the weight of someone who'd been through this scene too many times in too many places. He placed a hand over his heart in acknowledgement before returning to the cockpit. But the turbulence inside the cabin was just beginning. Up front, Mr. Aldridge, the man who had taken Jordan's original seat, was sweating through his designer vest. The seat that had felt like a throne minutes earlier now felt like a spotlight, burning hot, exposing every assumption he had made. He unbuckled slightly, leaning toward a nearby attendant. Can you tell him, Mr. Hayes, that I didn't mean anything by it? I thought the seat was well. They said it was mine. The attendant gave a polite nod, but her eyes flicked toward row 14 with an unmistakable message. Some apologies need to be made in person. Aldridge swallowed that truth like medicine too large to swallow gracefully. From the opposite aisle, a young woman, Earlier, one of the bystanders who had filmed the humiliation slowly lowered her phone. The screen displayed a paused video of Jordan being told to move. Her guilt was visible, a quiet ache in her expression. She clicked delete. Even the silence that followed felt like respect. Director Stone remained in the aisle a moment longer, addressing the new crew with firm, low instructions. It wasn't punitive, it was procedural, polished, the way an institution corrects itself when a leader is watching. Checklist Bravo completed? Yes, sir. Cabin reacquired? All sections green. Crew alignment? Confirmed. Ready to taxi. Only then did Stone turn back toward Jordan. Sir, Echo Protocol's report will be on your desk tonight. I'll oversee the review personally. Jordan nodded. Make it fair. Stone's stern face softened for the first time. With you, sir, fairness is the minimum. He stepped off the plane, leaving behind a final signature of authority, the door sealing shut behind him. The intercom chimed. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Not a single voice objected. Not a single person complained about the delay. No one dared. Because everyone on that aircraft had just learned the same lesson. Sometimes power doesn't sit in the front row. Sometimes it sits in 14C, quietly changing the room without raising its voice. Jordan settled back, closed his eyes, exhaled. The plane began to move, and the journey his and theirs was far from over. The engines rumbled as the aircraft pushed back from the gate, a slow, deliberate motion that felt less like a routine departure and more like a verdict being carried out. The runway lights streaked past the windows in long white lines, reflections trembling on the aluminum walls. Row 14 remained unnervingly calm. Jordan rested his hands loosely on the armrests, posture relaxed, eyes half open as if listening not to the cabin, but to the entire corporate machine humming quietly beneath him. He wasn't watching the passengers. He was watching the pattern, the rhythm, the consequences now in motion. The replacement crew moved through the aisle with practiced precision. No false smiles. No performative warmth. Only respect, clean, professional, unburdened by ego. A junior flight attendant approached Jordan with a fresh bottle of water. No theatrics, no groveling, just genuine service. Sir, she said softly, if you need anything during the flight, please let me know. It'll be assigned to your section. Jordan took the bottle with a small nod. Thank you. The simple response carried more weight than any scolding could. Respect given where no apology was demanded, only expected. Across the aisle, a ripple of uneasy whispers threaded through the rows. That's the CEO. The CEO of the whole airline? How did the crew not know? It's always the quiet ones. Someone added in a low breath. He didn't even raise his voice. And that more than the director's arrival, more than the crew replacement, was what unsettled people most. The silence had done the damage. The silence had carried the authority. Up front, Aldridge, the man who had taken Jordan's seat, kept adjusting his posture in 1A as though the leather had suddenly grown thorns. He stared at the call button, stared at Jordan, stared at his hands. Finally, he unbuckled and stood, slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a truth he had spent most of his life avoiding. He walked down the aisle, stopping beside row 14. Mr. Hayes? He said quietly. Jordan opened his eyes. Aldridge swallowed. I owe you an apology. Jordan studied him, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just assessing a man trying to figure out how to rearrange his dignity after having flaunted it so carelessly. You don't owe me, Jordan said calmly. You owe yourself the awareness you didn't have. Aldridge looked down. You're right. The admission surprised a few passengers who overheard not because they expected him to fight, but because they expected him to hide. He didn't. He nodded once, then returned to his seat with a heavy exhale, as though he had just descended from a higher altitude than the plane would ever reach. 30 minutes into the climb, the seatbelt sign turned off. The intercom chimed. The new captain spoke with a steady voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Thank you for your patience earlier. We are now at cruising altitude. Please enjoy the rest of your flight. But as the captain spoke, something else happened, something only the flight crew understood. A digital alert synced across the jump seats. Echo Protocol Phase 2 complete. Report released to Executive Command. Phase 2. That meant the internal review was already finished. That meant the consequences for the original crew were no longer pending, they were set. Fear threaded through the cabin, not from Jordan, but from the system behind him. The power he carried wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. It was systematic. It was the kind that didn't flex, it functioned. Carenson, sitting in a passenger seat near the front, looked like a statue that had lost its pedestal. She stared ahead with hollow eyes. The fear wasn't about losing her job. It was about realizing how easily she had handed away her humanity for authority she didn't truly have. Jordan's phone buzzed. A secure message. Encrypted. Direct from his executive assistant. Echo log complete. 4 policy violations. 2 behavioral flags. 1 safety breach. Recommended action. Permanent removal. Approval required. Jordan tapped a single line. Make it fair, not punitive. Retrain where retraining helps. Remove only where refusal persists. Another message blinked back. Understood, sir. Adjusting recommendations now. His breath left him in a slow exhale, controlled, steady, as if releasing not anger, but principle. Because for Jordan, justice was never about revenge. It was about correction, precision, balance. Passengers around him watched the quiet exchange without understanding the details, but they understood the shape of it, the tone, the authority. Respect moved through the aisle like a second pressurization. A woman in row 13 leaned over. Sir, I just want to say, I saw what happened earlier. I should have said something. Jordan turned his head toward her, expression soft. Most people don't, he said, but now you will. She nodded slowly, eyes stinging with the weight of the truth. The aircraft hummed on through calm skies. Jordan leaned back, closing his eyes again, not retreating, but resetting. Because battles like these were never new to him. Only the location changed. But this time, the world around him had seen it unfold. This time, silence hadn't swallowed the moment. This time, the consequences were immediate, visible, documented. And as the cabin settled into a fragile quiet, one truth lingered beneath the steady hum of engines. Power doesn't need the front seat. It just needs the right moment to stand up. Cruising altitude wrapped the aircraft in a smooth, almost serene quiet, the kind that settles after a storm but never fully erases the memory of thunder. Tray tables clicked open. Soft conversations resumed. But beneath the calm, a current pulsed through the aisles, low and electric. Everyone was recalibrating, reevaluating their assumptions, replaying what they'd said, reconsidering who they had judged. A woman in row 8 scrolled through her phone, staring at the short clip she had recorded earlier, Jordan being ordered out of his seat. She hovered over the share button. Her thumb trembled. Then she tapped delete. Her friend whispered, "But that would've gone viral." She shook her head. "Not everything needs to become a spectacle. Some things need to stay human." Up in first class, Aldridge sat stiffly in 1A, staring straight ahead with the haunted look of a man who had touched an electrical fence without realizing it was live. He pulled out his tablet, pretending to read, but his mind was somewhere else back in the aisle, hearing his own tone replay. "That's my seat." He closed his eyes, ashamed. When he opened them, one of the new attendants stood beside him. "Sir, would you like anything to drink?" Aldridge managed a small, rueful smile. "Only water, please. And maybe a bit of humility." The attendant paused, surprised by the candor, then nodded with a soft smile of her own. "Coming right up, sir." Meanwhile, Jordan sat quietly in 14C, his eyes tracing the outline of the cabin as if mapping the human variables within it. He wasn't angry, and he wasn't triumphant. He was thoughtful, because humiliation never surprised him anymore. He had learned long ago that certain battles arrived without invitation, that prejudice didn't check the credentials of the person it targeted. But the response today, swift, procedural, systemic, reminded him why he had built Aerolux the way he had. So no one who looked like him ever had to be small to be safe. His phone vibrated again. A new secure message. OPED draft from PR. Echo protocol enacted to ensure passenger safety and equality. Requesting your approval for press distribution. Jordan skimmed it. The language was clean, corporate, predictable. He typed, "Remove my name." Make it about policy, not ego. This isn't a headline. It's a correction. His assistant responded immediately. Understood, sir. Revising now. Jordan locked the screen. From row 10 came a soft voice. Mr. Hayes? Jordan turned. A young man, maybe mid-20s, glasses slightly crooked, laptop open on his tray, gave him a nervous smile. I'm sorry to bother you, the man said, but I work in tech. Startup stuff. And, I just wanted to say, what you did, how you handled it was powerful. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Powerful? The young man nodded. Most people think power is loud. You showed it can be quiet. Measured, fair. Jordan's expression softened. Power without restraint, he replied, is just noise. The young man smiled, almost relieved, as if the conversation itself was a lesson he didn't know he needed. Across the aisle, a mother quietly explained to her daughter what had happened. Why did they make him move? Mommy? Her voice was innocent, unarmored, honest. The mother hesitated because explaining prejudice to a child always felt like placing dust on something that should stay clean. Some people forget that all of us deserve respect, she finally said, no matter what they think they see. The little girl nodded, processing. Then he reminded them. Yes, the mother whispered. He did, without yelling. The little girl smiled, not at the drama, but at the idea. That's strong. The plane hummed on. Clouds drifted below in soft waves. A horizon stretched endless and golden. The intercom clicked again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've just received updated communications from headquarters. We'll be landing on schedule, and a formal statement from our corporate office will be released within the hour. Thank you. Passengers stole glances at Jordan. Some nods of respect, some of apology, some of quiet gratitude for a lesson learned without anyone bleeding. Even the new crew seemed subtly attuned to him maintaining professionalism without obsequiousness. Jordan didn't shift, didn't preen, didn't react. His silence remained the gravity in the room. Somewhere behind him, a middle-aged man spoke to his wife in a low, humbled tone. Him realizing, the world only changes because someone calm enough chooses not to walk away. His wife nodded, and someone powerful enough refuses to stay quiet. Jordan didn't hear the words. He didn't need to. The ripple was already moving. Across rows, across people, across assumptions, change didn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrived at cruising altitude, in row 14, with a man who knew that dignity doesn't need permission just a moment to stand its ground. The cabin lights dimmed to a mellow gold as the aircraft began its descent. The gentle shudder of lowering altitude rippled through the fuselage, a physical reminder that the flight, this long, quiet unraveling of assumptions, was reaching its final act. Passengers straightened their seats. Attendants secured the galley. The captain's voice floated through the speakers. Flight crew, prepare the cabin for arrival. But beneath the routine, something else was building a tension electric enough to make the hairs on one's arms rise. Everyone knew there was one last moment coming, one last reckoning. Jordan sat still, hands folded, watching the city lights grow larger through the window. The glow reflected off his face, soft, almost serene. The serenity of someone who had already made his decision long before anyone realized his hand was on the scale. As the wheels touched down with a gentle screech, a collective breath released across the cabin. Relief, anticipation, fear, awe, a spectrum of emotions layered into the silence. The plane slowed, turned, aligned itself with the jet bridge, and then before the cabin lights rose, Jordan's phone vibrated one more time. A single encrypted message, Echo protocol finalized, removed, 2 retrain, 3 flagged, 1, all actions implemented. He exhaled slowly. Not out of satisfaction, out of closure. The aircraft came to a complete stop. Seatbelt signs flicked off. Passengers rose cautiously, as if the air was made of something fragile. Aldridge stood in 1A but didn't move. He waited, for permission, for clarity, for absolution that wasn't his to grant or receive. Row after row turned toward row 14, eyes pressed with a mixture of gratitude, embarrassment, and reverence. Jordan finally stood. He didn't do it dramatically. He didn't do it slowly. He simply rose, gathering his coat with the same quiet control he had shown when he was ordered out of his rightful seat. But now, the room leaned toward him. Not out of fear, out of recognition. A new attendant stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, if you'd allow us, well, escort you through a private exit." Jordan shook his head. "Use it for someone who needs it more. I'll walk out like everyone else." The attendant hesitated, then nodded, humbled by the simplicity of the request. As he stepped into the aisle, something remarkable happened. People moved aside, not because he demanded space, not because he forced it, but because respect, when earned, widens paths without sound. Aldridge approached him first, voice low. "Sir, for whatever it's worth, thank you. For how you handled it." Jordan met his gaze. "Handle yourself just as well next time." Aldridge nodded, chastened. The passengers behind him paused, unsure whether to speak. Then a woman whispered, "You changed the tone of this flight." Another added, "You changed the tone of the people on it." Jordan didn't reply. He simply kept moving. The jet bridge door opened, revealing a cluster of high-ranking airline officials waiting with stiff posture and solemn expressions. Their badges gleamed under the terminal lights. The chief operating officer stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, "we've read the full Echo report. Actions have been executed. HR will conduct follow-up reviews. And, on behalf of the company you built, we deeply apologize." Jordan studied her for a moment. "Don't apologize for me," he said. "Apologize to every passenger who's ever been treated like less because someone couldn't see past their own assumptions." Her eyes softened. She nodded. "We will." Jordan continued down the jet bridge, the COO falling into step beside him, matching his pace without outpacing his presence. At the end of the jet bridge, in the terminal's open space, a few passengers drifted past, still whispering. One man murmured, "I'll never forget this flight." Another said, "I'm teaching my kids about it." A third added, "He didn't even need the front seat." Jordan walked through the terminal lights that glowed like a quiet applause. No cameras, no press, no spectacle, just footsteps, his, theirs, all moving forward in the echo of a lesson that didn't need shouting. He paused at the end of the concourse, looking back only once, not to revisit the humiliation, not to relish the consequence, but to acknowledge the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, sometimes it descends smoothly, like a landing gear touching ground after turbulence. Quiet, precise, undeniable. And as Jordan stepped into the terminal, the world outside the aircraft felt subtly, irrevocably changed. The terminal swallowed Jordan in a wash of white light and hushed announcements. Flight 227 now arriving. Baggage claim carousel 6. The ordinary hum of airport life untouched by the extraordinary shift that had just unfolded in the sealed metal tube behind him. But the aftershocks were already spreading. Behind him, at the jet bridge entrance, a cluster of ground staff leaned in, whispering in low, urgent tones. They had seen Director Stone earlier. They had seen the sealed envelope. They had connected the dots. Was that him? The Hayes? The one on the executive board? No, he is the board. Their voices were equal parts awe and caution. The sound of people realizing they had just witnessed a moment that would be retold in employee training for years. Jordan kept walking. He didn't need to hear them. He had lived this rhythm before, respect arriving late, dignity acknowledged in hindsight, power recognized only after being challenged. Farther ahead, another pocket of whispers grew. Passengers from the flight lingered near the moving walkway as if unwilling to disperse, as though stepping away from this moment would cause its clarity to fade. A woman from row 13 spoke softly to her husband. "It's strange. I'm ashamed of how we all sat there." Her husband nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "I kept thinking someone should say something, and then I realized that someone was me." Jordan paused, not because of their words, but because the walkway ahead was briefly congested. He stood still, hands clasped in front of him, posture patient. A little girl, the same one who had asked her mother why he was moved, looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, round, glowing with the curiosity only children possess. She tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, that's him." Her mother froze, then slowly nudged her daughter forward. "It's okay if you want to say something, sweetheart. The girl stepped closer, clutching a small, stuffed rabbit. I like how you didn't shout, she said. Jordan lowered himself slightly to her level, offering a gentle smile. Sometimes silence is louder, he replied. The girl nodded as though he had handed her a secret, then hurried back to her mother's side. Past the security checkpoint, two airline executives stood beside a column, waiting. Their suits were immaculate, their faces tight with the seriousness of people who knew exactly what was at stake. Mr. Hayes, one of them, began as Jordan approached. He held up a hand, not rudely, merely firmly. I'm walking on my own time right now. The executives exchanged a glance and fell into step behind him, giving him distance. It wasn't deference. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. A leader who didn't need ceremony, didn't want company forced on him. They followed anyway, ready to brief him if he requested it, willing to disappear if he didn't. Notifications pulsed through phones across the terminal. An aviation blogger posted, "Major leadership presence spotted at Gate 32. Something big is happening." A flight attendant discreetly typed in a staff group chat, "Echo protocol triggered." On a passenger flight. Unprecedented. A customer who had witnessed the scene typed a long message, then erased it. Not because it wasn't true, but because some stories didn't belong to those who watched. They belonged to those who lived them. Jordan reached the escalator leading down toward baggage claim. The metallic handrail gleamed under the terminal lights. As he stepped on, a man in a charcoal suit hurried toward him, breathless, tense, face flushed with self-reproach. "Sir, Mr. Hayes, please, just a moment." Jordan looked at him with calm curiosity. "I was in row 9, the man managed. I saw what happened, and I didn't say anything. I should have. I'm sorry." Jordan studied him not unkindly, not judgmentally, just truthfully. "Then say something next time," he answered. The man swallowed and nodded, chastened but grateful for the chance to be human again. At the bottom of the escalator, Jordan stepped off with the same quiet confidence head carried all day. The executives stayed behind, letting him move alone into the open concourse. As he walked toward the exit, the airport around him buzzed on families reuniting, workers scanning badges, travelers dragging suitcases, but the energy near him bent, softened, shifted. People made space. People lowered their voices. People watched not with curiosity, but with reflection. He crossed the final stretch of polished tile and paused at the automatic glass doors. The evening air beyond shimmered with city lights. For a moment, he stood still. Not to savor victory, not to replay humiliation, but to take in the simple truth blossoming in the quiet. What happened on that plane had already outgrown the plane. It was in the looks people exchanged, the lessons unspoken but absorbed, the subtle rearrangement of how strangers saw one another. Just before stepping into the cool night, Jordan breathed one line into the silence. No audience, no cameras, no need for either. Dignity travels with you. And then he walked out, leaving the doors to close behind him and the echo of that lesson to spread through the terminal like a slow, steady dawn. Night wrapped the city in a soft, smoky blue as Jordan stepped outside the terminal. Taxi headlights drifted across the pavement. A shuttle rolled past with a low hum. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and cold metal, a scent he had grown familiar with over years of traveling for board meetings, negotiations, mergers, and now, lessons. He walked toward the curb with a steady cadence, shoulders relaxed, coat draped over one arm. To anyone watching, he looked like just another man going home from a long flight. But the space around him felt subtly charged, as if the air itself recognized what had unfolded inside the aircraft. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. His driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a crisp cap, stepped out immediately. "Evening, Mr. Hayes," he greeted. "Rough flight?" Jordan gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, a revealing one. The driver opened the back door. Jordan paused before entering, glancing up at the terminal's glowing windows one last time. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He wasn't expecting applause. He was acknowledging the distance he had traveled in a single flight, not miles, but meaning. He entered the car with quiet grace. Inside the terminal, echoes of the incident ricocheted through the staff hallways. Supervisors huddled by the operations board. Crew members murmured in anxious knots. A training manager tapped notes into her tablet. preparing what would soon become a mandatory case study for all frontline staff. Echo Protocol had been a legend in the company, rumored, whispered, half-believed. A disciplinary measure created only for the highest level of corporate intervention. Most employees thought it was a myth. Tonight proved it wasn't. One staff member whispered, "It's real," and he used it. Another replied, "No, he didn't use it. He activated it." There's a difference, and there was, because Jordan hadn't weaponized his authority. He had exercised it quietly, precisely, without gloating. Meanwhile, in the admin wing, Director Stone sat in a small, glass-walled conference room, reviewing the final Echo report. His jaw was tight, his posture rigid. He wasn't angry, he was contemplative. As he reached the last page, he exhaled. The report wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about saving the company's image. It wasn't even about consequences. It was about recalibration. Resetting expectations where humanity had slipped. Stone closed the file and leaned back, murmuring to himself, he could have destroyed careers tonight. Instead, he corrected them. He wasn't talking about the removed crew. He was talking about everyone, staff, passengers, even himself. On the road home, Jordan sat in the back seat with the faint vibration of the city beneath him. Streetlights painted gold streaks across the windows. Cars drifted past like silent shadows. His phone glowed again. A message from the COO. Press statement released. Echo Protocol will be reviewed for broader implementation. Your note on fairness has been incorporated. Jordan typed a brief reply. Good. Make it sustainable, not symbolic. The driver glanced at him through the mirror. Everything all right, sir? Jordan nodded. Everything is as it should be. The driver hesitated, then ventured. If you don't mind me saying so, the way you carry yourself. I don't know many people like that. Jordan looked out the window at the passing lights. My grandmother used to tell me, he said quietly, when someone tries to shrink you, stand so still that they're forced to notice your shape. The driver smiled softly. Sounds like a wise woman. She was, Jordan said, voice carrying a faint warmth. She scrubbed floors for people who never learned her name, but she taught me mine. They drove on. Across the city, in living rooms and quiet hotel bars, passengers from the flight were retelling the story in different tones, shame, awe, reflection. A businessman from row 10 said to his wife, "It wasn't what he did, it was what he didn't do." Aldridge sat alone in his condo, staring at the glass of water head requested on the flight. It trembled faintly in his hand, not from fear, but from realization. He set it down and whispered to the empty room, "I will do better." A mother tucked her daughter into bed. The girl clutched her stuffed rabbit. "Mommy," she murmured, "I want to be strong like him." Her mother kissed her forehead. "You will be," she whispered. "Just remember, kindness is a form of strength, too." As the sedan entered Jordan's neighborhood, the noise of the city softened. Townhouses lined the street in neat rows. Porch lights glowed like small suns. The car pulled up to his home, a modest, understated place for a billionaire, but perfect for a man who valued silence more than spectacle. Jordan stepped out, inhaling the cool night. The stars were faint, drowned by city glow, but present. He walked up the path slowly, each step steady, unhurried. At the door, he paused. Not from reluctance, but from reflection. He replayed the flight in his mind. Not the humiliation, not the outrage, not even the consequences. Just one moment, sitting in row 14, calm, unbroken, knowing exactly who he was. He whispered into the quiet night, voice barely audible. Power doesn't make noise, it makes direction. He opened the door and stepped inside. The lights clicked on. Warm, soft, inviting. Jordan closed the door behind him with a gentle push. No slam, no force, and the house received him like an old friend. The world outside continued spinning, but inside, everything was still, balanced, clear, at peace. And in that peace, the final truth settled. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the whole room listens.